Okay, hello, and welcome to the Book Troop live show for the month of February. This month we read The Reformatory by Tananarive Due, which is a horror novel that has, just come out at the end of last year that I've just been hearing really great things about. And this is my friend Sarah over here. Her channel is Sarah without an H, and I will have her channel linked down below. This is so exciting because this is actually like our first ever face-to-face hangout, which is pretty cool. Also, I just wanted to mention at the beginning, my friend Aaron was also supposed to join us on the live show today, but unfortunately she wasn't able to join us. But I will still have her channel linked down below if you want to go and check her out, show her some love and show her support, because I really love Aaron's channel as well, and she's a close friend. And yeah, and if Sarah, would you want to maybe introduce yourself? I know this is like your first time like being on the book club, and if anybody's not familiar with Sarah and her channel, then I'll have her link down below. But yeah, if you just want to kind of maybe introduce yourself and kind of talk about your channel and what you do over there, that kind of thing.
Yeah. No, my name's Sarah. I do a lot of reading vlogs. I love like a reading challenge. I love a themed vlog.
Yes.
I always do like lots of like different styles of vlogs.
Yeah.
I'm also known for being a little bit of a tough critic when it comes to books.
Yeah, just a little bit.
I don't give very many things 5 stars. That's kind of a thing about me. Yeah, that's my channel.
That's exciting. Yeah. Hello, hi Katie, hi Gavin, 2 of my friends. Aw, Katie, that's so sweet. Thank you. Yeah, no, I loved the video you did where you read like the worst books of 2023. That was great. I think those are so fun.
I did like some books in that video though. I read like Addie LaRue. And
I know. I was gonna say, is that the one you read Project Hail Mary for too? Because
no, I read that for reading my subscribers' worst books.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, I remember watching that, and I was so happy that you enjoyed Project Hail Mary because I was like, that book is so like comforting. I don't know. There's something.
That one to me is kind of like Evelyn Hugo, where it kind of transcends people's reading taste. Like like no matter what you're into, I think you'll like it.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I also read Hellbent and reading Booktuber's worst, and I gave that 5 stars.
Nice. Well, there you go. Maybe you should continue with that because like you've had success there.
Always read people's worst books.
Yeah.
Yeah, those two actually tend to go better.
Right. You have more success there. So like,
yeah, I think it's because maybe my expectations are low, or like, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, that could be it, honestly. Yeah. But thank you so much to everybody already joining us in the chat. I appreciate you. What's going on? Thank you so much for being here. And so, yeah, so today we're going to be discussing The Reformatory, which was our book troop pick for this month. And this was a very heavy, hard-hitting horror novel that was quite depressing, to be honest, and just a really intense read. So I apologize if this was a little bit much for some people, because understandably so, this was a lot. This was, it was quite a bit. For anybody joining us in the chat, I would love to know if you were able to read along with us this month, or if you didn't read along with us this month. No worries there, because the beginning will be spoiler free, so you can hang out for a bit if you haven't read it. But maybe in the chat, if you want to put like maybe an orange heart if you did read this month, and then maybe a black heart in the chat if you didn't read, just so I can get a visual for who's all here because they've read it. And then while everybody's doing that, would you mind, Sarah, maybe like pitching just like a non-spoilery synopsis for anybody who hasn't read the book yet?
Yeah, so this is about 2 main characters. We have Gloria and Robert. Robert is 12, and I think Gloria, she's a little bit older. She's like 16.
I think so.
And their dad, they are Black, and their dad was accused of a crime, so he had to flee there to a small town. They live in like a really small Florida town that's giving like sundown town KKK vibes. So at the very start of the book, Robert, he has like an altercation with a white boy that's like really from a really important family. So he gets sent to this reformatory, which is like a school for boys that like misbehave. And obviously it's like really abusive there. And then Gloria's POV is like she's trying to get him out the whole book. And that's kind of it's just their like harrowing experience amongst some very evil white people.
Very, very evil white people. Well, awesome. Wow. Thank you so much to everybody who's able to read along this month. I know that I feel like more than ever before with the book troop, I feel like this was quite a big ask, for me to be like, hey, let's read this one together. Not only because it's so long, like this one is over 550 pages. So it's officially like the longest book I've ever had for my own book club, but it's also like, I think it's a lot to ask of people to read something like this because it's so horrific and so sad and so tough to read. So I do appreciate anybody who was able to give this a chance this month and read along with us, because I know that this was not an easy one. And this is definitely considered an adult novel. Even though we do follow some characters who are younger, it's definitely an adult. Like I would not recommend for.
Yeah, maybe like an older teen, like a teen like that's like 16 or older could read it if they
Yeah.
like knew what they were getting themselves into. But yeah, I definitely wouldn't recommend this as like young adult.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's interesting because like the only reason a book can get classified as young adult is not really because of the protagonist, right? It's really like who the audience, like who is the book
Yeah,
for, I think. Yeah, right.
it's
So
definitely for adults, I would say.
yeah, this is definitely an adult read. It's definitely a tough read. But I'm also glad that I had this for a book club discussion because I do feel like this book is really important and I do feel like it'll make for a good discussion. So with that being said, I would love to know, how everybody felt about this book. I would love to know your ratings in the chat. I think the best thing I can say about this right now, even though it was a tough read for the book club, is that I feel like this is the best results I've seen from having a book as a book troop pick because almost across the board I've been seeing people give this like 4 or 5 stars. It seems like it's either like people are DNFing it or they're giving it 4 or 5 stars. So it seems like if a lot of people made it to the end, they're rating it pretty high. Whereas like I completely understand though if you had to DNF this for like whatever reason, I completely get that. But I feel like overall like this might have been my most successful book club pick of all time in terms of like crowd pleasing ratings, you know what I'm saying? Like so yeah, I mean just look at this, like
A
5
lot of
stars,
5
5 stars.
stars. Yeah,
Like,
that's
yeah, it's
crazy.
wild. It's
Yeah,
like
you guys loved
wow.
it.
Look at that. Like that's it makes me feel good. It makes me feel good that so many people ended up enjoying this. So so with that being said, Sarah, I don't know what you rated it yet. Would you want to like would you want to like let me know?
Okay.
Go ahead.
I personally gave it 2 stars.
Oh my god. I'm like everybody loved
I tried
it.
okay, listen, I tried to gaslight myself into saying I was gonna give it 3 stars because I think the subject matter is super important.
Right.
I don't think there's anything wrong with Tanana Reeves Dew's writing,
Mhm.
like the actual prose.
Yeah.
I wanted to DNF. I didn't realize this was gonna be so heavily historical fiction. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't like historical fiction. Like I very, very, very rarely read that. Like I've read
Yeah.
like The Nightingale, but like not much besides that.
Yeah.
And I think for me, like I was talking about it with Riley, and I kept telling her all my thoughts, and she's like, "Girl, I don't think you think this is a 3-star." Like she had to be like, "It's okay to give it 2 stars." I was like, "But the subject matter is so important." But at the end of the day, I wrote in my notes when you sent me the questions, I just wrote "boring is boring," and
Yeah.
I thought it was really slow and really repetitive, and I didn't. Well, I don't want to get into more because you have a list of questions, but
Yeah.
I just thought it was really slow.
No,
That was my take on it.
that is completely fair. And I do think, at least for me, I do think if this wasn't a book club pick, I would have struggled a lot to get through. Because I do agree. Like I wrote in I did end up vlogging this book, which the vlog will probably be going up in the next few days. But like I was mentioning how the first like 200 to 250 pages for me were so slow, and I found it really hard to get invested. Because I do think like Tanana Reeve, I think she's incredible at like writing characters that feel so real and like it's almost like instantly like you connect with them and they feel very real and well fleshed out, and like so that wasn't the issue for me. It's just more like the plot itself was very slow moving, and I agree, like I don't read historical fiction like very often. It's not my favorite. It's not my favorite. So it felt very very historical fiction. Yeah, like Kat said, it's definitely more like literary historical fiction kind of vibe.
Yeah,
And
I
so
definitely I was gonna say I definitely liked I loved the characters, and I thought that she did a really amazing job of like making the story feel very real. I just wish that it had been like maybe 200 or 300 pages shorter.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree there. I feel like ratings wise, I actually struggled with this one quite a bit because it was like you said, like I didn't know how to rate it at the end because it was like the beginning was such a struggle for me to get into, but then by the time I got to the ending, like I flew through the last like 200-ish pages or so. Like I was really invested by that point, and then I was even so like moved to tears at the end of this book like multiple times. So it was kind of like it was hard for me to think about rating this because it's like I think story wise, just like looking at this as a story, it's like that's a 5-star story, like that's a 5-star brilliant idea. But then like my experience reading the book, it's like I want to rate it somewhere like a 4-star or 4.5-star just because the reading experience was so tough at times and because the beginning was so slow and I found it so hard to get into. So I don't think it's my perfect like 5-star read, but I think I'm gonna fall somewhere between like 4 and 4.5 stars for this. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I totally agree with everything you said about the historical fiction elements can be really like slow, especially if it's not a genre you typically read, like
Right.
which we don't. So
I also just
um
think it could have used, like, again, her prose was great. I think it just
mhm.
could have, like, I'm like, girl, we don't have to be here for this many pages. Like,
Yeah.
that was, and I think at the end of the day, for me, book ratings are, they can be about the content, but they're also sometimes about like the execution of the story. And I
Yeah.
just thought, to me, it was such a hindrance that I was like, I can see why other people like it, but it just wasn't like my personal rating scale is a 2 star.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's totally fair. And I like seeing like different like reasonings why, because like I totally agree that like the idea for a story can be 5 stars, but if the execution doesn't, like yeah, if the story is like 100 or 200 pages too long, then like that could totally like impact like how you feel about the reading experience overall. So I definitely understand that. And yeah, let's see. Oh yeah, so I did want to ask if you have, I think you said you haven't, but have you read this author's books before?
No, I
No, okay.
haven't. I give me up front, I don't know if I will, because I went on Goodreads and looked at the length of all her
Yeah,
books.
I was
Some of
gonna
the
say
books,
that.
yeah, some of the books from like her very early career, like her debut and like the one after that, like that she wrote in like the 90s and early 2000s, are more appropriately 300-ish in something pages.
Right.
But like in comparison, so I was like, am I crazy for thinking this is really long? So I went and I looked up Grady. I mean, I know Grady Hendrix is completely different tone, whatever. But I was like,
Yeah.
you know what? Grady Hendrix writes fairly chunky horror, and his books are like 350, maybe 400 pages. And I was like, okay, girl,
Yeah.
we could have cut
Yeah.
off 2 novella lengths off this.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, for that reason alone, I don't think I'll read The Good House, because I'm just like, I only like to read books this long if they're fantasy. And even then I do that very infrequently. Like I'll read like the fifth season or something, but even that is
Yeah.
very long.
That's so interesting. Yeah, because I'm not really a fantasy reader either. So like I typically don't read books that are this long, like on the regular. So I definitely get that. But there has been like a lot of horror books that I've read that are long or longer than this that I've enjoyed. Like I like Chuck Wendig, for example, is like one of my favorite horror authors, and all of his books are like ridiculously long. But I always do have the critique too that like I think those books are too long. And that's usually why I don't ever give them like 5 stars, because I'm always just like, I mean, the idea was great, but then like you could have cut that down, a little bit. So I totally understand. And yeah, I've only read The Good House from this author. I read The Good House, and I think I gave that one like, I want to say 3.5 or 4 stars. I don't know. It was somewhere in that territory for me. But I also thought that it was a little bit too long for me. And then I didn't connect with the characters in The Good House as much as I connected with the characters in this book. But then I have read Tananarive Due. She had a short story that was in the Out There Screaming Jordan Peele collection. And that
Mhm.
one ended up being one of my favorite short stories, like in that entire collection. So I almost kind of wish that she would maybe like explore like
Edit
short,
herself
yeah,
out.
like I almost wish she would like maybe explore the like short horror novella kind of genre, because I do think like her ideas, they're there.
I would maybe read, if she came out with something like that. I would maybe like either a novella or like something that's like 250, 300 pages. I probably would read from her, because her prose is very good. Like I really
Mhm.
liked her writing style. It was
Yeah,
just like the amount of scene, and I thought the dialogue scenes were very long. Like
yeah,
sometimes it was like, girl, there's no way that people are standing around talking for this long, especially
yeah,
when like time is of the essence.
yeah, yeah. No, I get that. I get that. But very interesting. Okay, so let me see. So I guess we kind of answered this, but I had the question of like, how did you feel about the writing style and the pacing and the atmosphere? I feel like we kind of covered this because,
Yeah.
historical fiction's not typically, I mean, I do think if you love historical fiction, I think you'd probably eat this shit up like a lot more than we did,
Yeah,
because the
yeah.
historical fiction like is really strong. Like the atmosphere is very strong in this book. I felt like I was in the 1950s in Florida while reading this.
No, I agree. I
Like
agree. The
yeah,
atmosphere was perfect. Like it felt really real.
yeah.
Like yeah.
Yeah. So I mean I think we kind of got that. I was wondering though, this will probably be my last question before we jump into spoilers, just because there's quite a bit to talk about with this one. But the last question would be like, did you like that we had multiple perspectives in this book? Because for a lot of the beginning of this book, we do go back and forth between the brother, Robert or Robbie when he's like in the reformatory, and then we also get like his sister Gloria's perspective as she's like trying to like, was there a point of view that you preferred one more than the other, or how did you feel about the perspectives?
I preferred Robert's perspective.
Yeah.
It was definitely I was conflicted because I liked Gloria as a character,
Hmm.
but I kind of felt like her point of view was pointless. Like I just
Yeah.
wish I was actually surprised because when it started with her having a POV, I was like, oh, after he goes to the school, it'll be all Robbie. Like that's what I thought was going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I think her POV bloated the book because there was so many, like, I understand it was showing the realistic side of like she's trying to get her brother out of the school. And so she's trying all these different methods. And it felt very historically accurate. But like,
Yeah.
I think somebody in the comments earlier said that they felt like Gloria's POV was historical fiction and Robbie's was like supernatural thriller horror.
Oh,
And
that's
I was like, I think that's why I liked his perspective better because I
yeah.
don't know. So I kind of wish her, no offense to Gloria, I kind of wish
Yeah.
she hadn't had a POV.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. That's actually a really great point about like how different the perspectives felt. Um and yeah, I would actually agree. Like I do think for me, Gloria's perspective it was a lot slower and I got a lot more invested right away in Robbie's point of view and timeline because I feel like there was a lot more things happening with Robbie like on page that was like really interesting to read about. Where I do agree, like Gloria, like I see the reason why, especially at the end of the book, like I do see the reason why her chapters were there, and it was just really trying to show like the day-to-day kind of like racism that
Right.
was going on, and then also like the real life, like how difficult it was for her to get this done for her brother. Like I understand why it was there, but I also agree that like her parts really dragged for me, and a lot of them felt very like repetitive
Yes.
in a way, because it was just like the same thing over and over again
Yeah.
where she's trying to get her brother out, and like she's facing another obstacle, and like she's not able to get this done. And I agree that it definitely dragged down the story quite a bit for me. And I almost feel like we would have gotten almost the same book without her point of view entirely. You know what
I
I'm saying?
agree. I agree.
Yeah,
Maybe we
like,
could like maybe not take it out entirely, but like because someone said that like her perspective is highlighting systemic racism and like the
yeah,
day to day, like you were saying.
yeah.
I agree with that, but it's almost like that's what made her feel like a history book and not
Hmm.
like Robbie's perspective was like things are happening. I'm still learning, but like things are happening.
Right, right.
Versus like hers was more like I went to try to get a lawyer and this is what happened. Like I don't know. I just
Yeah,
felt like and then obviously a lot of things she tried didn't work. So I sometimes it just felt like we went down a path. Like I guess it was realistic, but it's hard because it just felt like
yeah,
repetitive. You were saying,
yeah, yeah. No, I definitely get that. But I agree that I do feel like the story could have been a little bit more interesting and maybe cut down a little bit if it was only from Robbie's perspective. But I do understand the bigger picture that this author was trying to paint with this story. So like I get why she was there,
I agree.
for sure. But okay, and then I do think I want to go ahead and jump into spoilers from this point on, just because I do feel like there is quite a bit to talk about with like some of the things that go on in this book. So I want to get the opportunity to talk about that. So if you haven't read the book or if you just don't want to be spoiled, now would be the time when we, we part ways. So thank you so much for being here for this part. But I am interested in talking about some spoilers because there's a lot that goes down in this book, and there's a lot that I would like to talk about. So from this point forward, we will be discussing spoilers. So I think the biggest spoiler thing that I want to ask you is if you predicted the twist,
That
which
blue
was
that blue was a ghost. Yeah,
yes.
I did. I did.
Okay, you did, because
Did you?
I feel stupid
You
that I
didn't predict
didn't.
it.
I didn't see it coming. I was like, oh, like jaw on the floor. I was like, wait, what?
No, I knew it, especially because like when they went to the what was it called? The place where they would get like whipped.
Yeah,
Um
the fun house.
the fun house, yeah. When they went to the fun house and like Boone didn't look at him or like talk to him and he ran back like I'm gonna go back to bed. I'm like, there's no
Oh,
way at this school that you would get beat.
right.
Um so yeah, no, I did guess that he was
Yeah, see, I
gonna
wasn't paying close enough attention to things like that, I guess. It's like literally, like, okay, if you're still here and you haven't read it, let me just paint you a little picture, okay? Because this guy is like, he's like, I need you to like catch all they call them haints at the school, but they're like
Mhm.
essentially ghosts. And he's like, because he discovers that, Robbie, this kid can like see ghosts and like he can see them. So he's like, I'm gonna need you to like catch all these haints for me. And then he's like, this is the one that I really like need you to catch. And he shows him a picture and it's like his freaking friend. And like I guess the reason why I wasn't expecting it was because I thought that like Robbie was aware when he was seeing somebody who's a ghost. Like I thought he was like aware of anyone who was a ghost. Like I thought it was made more obvious to him. So I didn't think that even he would be tricked as like it's somebody who's like his friend. Like I don't know. I just didn't see it coming and I feel stupid.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, to be fair, there were only a couple of hints. I think she did a good job of like, if you're someone that's good at guessing plots, you might get it. Whatever. I do think that somebody mentioned the cornfield was like probably the biggest that's when I solidified. I was like, oh, he's a ghost for sure. I was already thinking it, but then when he was like and then he disappeared, I was like, there's no way this kid is moving that fast.
True. But still, oh my god, I was like, I don't know. That was like one of the first moments in the book where I got really hooked because I was like surprised
Right.
for a second, and then I was like, oh my gosh, and then I wasn't expecting this whole storyline with like Haddock and the way that he was like the reason why he was trying to catch these haints, and that whole story of how like he was, he had all these pictures of himself like naked with these kids. Like, oh my god, like that whole storyline, like once that came into play, I was like, oh my god, what is actually going on here? Like, this is wild.
That one I felt like was a little that was the one plot line that I was like, this book was already such a tough read, and then
Yeah.
you made him a pedophile on top of that. I was
Yeah.
like, girl, please. I mean, I understand that that's probably realistic, like these reform, like, there's abuse from all sides, but that was the one where I was like, maybe I am just too sensitive, but I
Mm-hmm.
was like, we can't be having this plot line too. That's a
Yeah.
lot.
No, that's what I mean. It was like, it was already like, yeah, such a tough read just on top of everything else that these characters are going through, dealing with. And then, yeah, to have the added element of like, oh, and he's a pedophile and he's trying to catch these freaking haints so that he can bury it, basically. Like, I know. I did get that from him right away too, but just to have that like added element later on in the book was just like, oh wow.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah. I was
yeah,
like,
but something that I thought was kind of cool that I almost wish was like explored a little bit more is I can't remember which character was talking about this, but I wrote it down that it was in part 2 when they were talking about like the history of the reformatory, and they said that there was a guy that worked there. I can't remember if this was like Percy or like who it was, but they said that when he worked there it like changed him, or he felt like he was like being brainwashed by the reformatory, and like he's
yeah.
like, I don't even remember, but like I shot at kids even though I didn't, like he didn't want to do that, but he felt like compelled to or something. I thought that was really interesting, and I feel like it got touched on and then it never really came up again in the way that I wanted it to,
I
Like
think it was Uncle June. I think that was who that character.
right, right. It was just like it was such an interesting like I love the idea of like a place or like something like brainwashing people into doing things that they wouldn't do otherwise. Like I find that so horrific and like creepy, and at least in terms of like horror books, like that's something that I'm really into with like horror tropes. Like I think that's really fascinating, but I feel like it never really got touched on. Like I thought it could be going in that direction where it would be like, I mean, maybe that would take away from the bigger message of like, no, people are just racist and they're awful and like that's really,
Yeah.
that's sad as it is. But I thought it was like going in that direction of like, oh, maybe these people are being brainwashed by like the history of this place or something like that, I don't know.
Yeah. I guess the way that I took that part wasn't that it was like something supernatural or brainwashing happening. It was
Mhm.
more that when you are around people doing such bad things, it's easy to become one of them. Like it's easy
Oh,
to
yeah.
join in. It's easy to be your worst self when you're around such evil.
Yeah.
That's what I got out of it. But I could see
That makes sense.
why you interpreted it the way you did, because it did feel like the school had a weird like energy. I could see
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I mean, that actually makes a lot more sense the way that you just said it. I don't know why I was thinking like, oh, like supernatural, like it's going in a direction where like they're all being like brain controlled or something.
Yeah, no, I think it was more like, because to me, the bigger horror in this story was like more like people are evil, like they're worse
Yeah.
than the
Yeah.
ghosts kind of thing. So that's why I took it that way.
Yeah. No, I think that is such a good point because I did see a few people earlier in the chat kind of talking about how like, oh, this book didn't really feel like horror to me, or it didn't feel like, your typical horror book because the horror elements don't really come in until like the end with like paranormal stuff. But it's also like I do think this is a great example of a real life horror book. Like it's showing how humanity can be so evil and like the racism that exists in these small towns, especially like back in the 1950s. Like I feel like this is one of those like prime examples of like a real life horror, like something that's so unsettling and disturbing.
Mhm.
um but yeah, I mean, as far as like the paranormal elements of this story, like is that kind of what you were expecting with like, because I know like in the premise it does kind of talk about how like Robbie can like see ghosts and stuff, so like were you expecting like that kind of element to be like a huge part of the story, or like how did you feel about the paranormal aspects of the story?
I gotta get frank. I don't think I loved the ghost catching plot line.
Mm-hmm.
It felt like a little goofy in comparison to the seriousness of the book.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. Obviously, I do what I did read online though that the way she represented hoodoo apparently is very accurate. Like
Oh,
she
okay.
obviously did her research. I read
Mm-hmm.
that in a review on Goodreads. So I think that's cool. I guess I think I wanted something else from the ghosts. I don't know what I wanted. I think because this was labeled as horror, I was just expecting more of a horror book, and it
Yeah,
was more like it was just even him hunting the ghost was sad. I was like, oh, everything is sad
it
because
it was sad.
apparently when he hunts the ghost, it hurts them, and I'm like, that's sad too.
Yeah,
And
I
it's like these
know.
boys that were murdered in like very sad ways, and they didn't deserve it. So it's just like, okay, I don't really want him to hunt these ghosts.
Yeah, no, literally. I know everything about this was so sad and
Yeah,
depressing. But yeah, that's exactly, yeah, perfect example of everyday horror that still exists today. And
yeah,
that's why I think she was able to do such a good job of like showing that like everyday horror that still
right.
exists. Um, but yeah, I thought Mel made a good point too. I thought it was going to be supernatural, but I'm glad it wasn't. So the bad guys had no excuse. That's what
Yeah,
I mean. Like, I understand why she didn't end up going that route because it's like you just want to show that some people are just like racist and it's horrific. Like you don't want to take away from that by being like they were actually brainwashed by
right.
the reformatory or something. You know, like no, it's actually just like real and it sucks and people suck.
Yeah, I
So,
agree.
um, so yeah, and then one of the parts that I was really like shocked by in the book is when like the whole situation with like Redbone's character and how that ended up going where he like took the blame or I don't know if he necessarily like took the blame for him, but in a way he kind of did and then like that was what led to his death too. Like that whole scene was also really like for me because it's like the whole thing is like he wants to escape with his friend, you know, and like he
Yeah.
had all these plans and like it was devastating. It was like one heartbreaking thing like after the next, and it
That
was
was
just
another thing.
so.
I could have done with the plot not having Redbone die. I
I
was like,
know.
girl, you put these people through a lot. Could Redbone not also get out, please?
Yeah. Well, that's what I mean. Like, did you see the ending of this book going in any other direction? Like, because for a while there, I was kind of thinking, like, is this just gonna end like really sad and everybody's gonna die and like there's gonna be no hope? Like, I was almost wondering if like, because I was like, there's no way, right? I was like, there's no way that Tananarive is gonna like set up these characters and then have them like not achieve their goal at the end, right? Like, there's no way. But for a
Yeah,
second there, I was like, maybe I don't
yeah,
know.
no, it is interesting. It was interesting because it was like obviously everything was very realistic. I'm sure like people there are people in this time period who experience like trauma after trauma after trauma, and I understand that she was representing that. But there were times where I was like, it almost made the ending feel kind of like all of a sudden everything magically worked out when
Hmm.
everything up to that point was so difficult. Like every time Robert made a decision, it was the wrong decision and he got in trouble or Redbone got in trouble or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what point I'm trying to make. I guess I just the ending for me was kind of like I'm glad I guess what I'm saying is I'm glad that it was a happy ending because I
Hmm.
would have been like, you can't put us through that and they can't they got to get out. But I just wish
Yeah.
that Redbone could have gotten out as well.
I know. I know, and that's the thing too, Cassidy. Like, I really thought he was going to backstab Robert Blue because he said no one stays nice so many times. Ugh.
Yeah,
He stayed true and real to the end.
I know. I unfortunately, I understand why Blue was the way he was, but I actually didn't like him because of how he would just bully Robert. I was like,
Yeah.
he could send you away if he wants. Leave him alone.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, yeah, Robert spent so much of it or so much of his time like protecting Blue, so it was just kind of a uh, yeah, that whole situation was very interesting. I mean, I kind of liked the intense like situation where, you know, like Haddock wanted Robert to catch these haints, but then like Blue was at the same time like threatening him like you can't do this or else I'm going to like lure in your mother's ghost and like harm her. So it's like it really put Robbie in like an interesting situation where like he had to figure out like how to balance this, and I thought that aspect of the story was really interesting to me, just to see how he would handle it. But also like the fact that Redbone kind of died because of that situation was also just like it was devastating. Um, but then I was gonna ask too, like, how did you feel about just like the ending in general with like because I thought it was really sweet, like the scenes where he was like fleeing and like running away when he had all of the like stuff from Haddock's desk or whatever. And then the way he said the papers were like flying through the air, like did he say it was either Redbone or his mom that was like guiding him, or like it was like the
Mhm.
help of like the Haints that was like guiding him in the right direction stuff? Like I thought that was really sweet. It was like it almost made me like a little misty reading that part. But how did you feel about like the ending overall? Because I know like it was it kind of like cheesy for you, like the way they were able to escape and then get out of there, or was it like I don't know, like how did it
Um,
feel for you?
I guess I kind of wish that Gloria or Robert would have been a little bit more involved in the ending of Haddock because
Mm-hmm.
it felt like obviously the whole book. I feel like this. I think this was intentional. It's like The only thing Robbie does that's intentional at the beginning is kick Lyle, and then it's kind of it triggers all these events. But everything after that is like he doesn't have any agency because he's like being kept in this. And so I kind of wanted, and so then it kind of bummed me out that even the ending resolution was still not his own agency. It's like he was about to escape, and then Blue's like, "No, we're actually gonna go kill Haddock," and he's like, "Fine, I guess."
Yeah.
And then I mean, obviously, I mean, I don't want Robert to be like a killer, but I don't know. I guess I just it felt like, okay, if you could bewitch the dog the whole time, why didn't you do that sooner?
Right. I don't know. How did you feel about getting like Haddock's like perspective almost in the end? Because like I feel like once we got that reveal of like Haddock was like a pedophile or whatever, it's like we started getting like little glimpses into like his point of view where he'd be like thinking about like the Haints and stuff. And then wasn't it like right when he was dying, we got like a perspective of him where he's like his life flashes before his eyes and he thinks about his like little sister that he killed or
Oh,
something.
yeah, he said he saw her face in the water, like laughing
Yeah.
at him under the water. There also was like a little perspective we got of him earlier in the book too, when he described the fire, like how he set the fire.
Right.
Um, I guess his chapters were fine. I already was wanting less POVs, so
Well, that's what I mean.
when
I
she
was
threw
like
him in again, I was like, "Girl, we can't have a third POV."
no, yeah, I agree. I was kind of like at that point, sorry, Tank is banging on the door. But yeah, I agree. Like by that point, I was kind of like, okay, like I don't want another perspective because it was already like feeling like a lot with the ones that we had. But I was also kind of like, I don't need the perspective of this guy. Like I don't care, you know? Because like he was already so like
He's
awful and
evil.
yeah, and I was like, I don't need this man's like because I was kind of wondering like with that last point of view and like right when he was dying and he like saw his baby sister or whatever, I was like, is this here to make us like feel sympathy for him or is this here to like humanize him or like I didn't really fully see the purpose of like getting his point of view in that final scene, you know, because I was like, just let him die,
Let
you
him
know, like he's
die.
he's
Yeah,
evil, he's awful, like I don't want to hear anymore.
yeah,
So but yeah, I kind of agree. His death was quick. It was just like I mean, the thing that I did like though about his death is how it was like Robbie said it was something like all the spirits of like the Haints were like in the water or something.
like
So he
petting
was
him. Yeah,
yeah, like he was able to like use the energy and the strength from all the Haints that had died. And I thought that was kind of cool. That way it was kind of like all of them being able to get revenge against this man in the end. You know, it was like they got their peace with that, I think. So I did like how they incorporated that into the ending. But I also like I did think it was beautiful how like the story ended with like them, you know, being reunited with their dad in Chicago. I thought that was like a really beautiful way to end it. And I loved the way I wrote down because she said when she said they're leaving for Chicago, she said they were like astronauts taking off to the moon. And I thought that was so like that metaphor I thought was really cute. And then I love that he ended the story with like the line where he said something like he had learned that the dead can help you fly or something because of the help that he got from the Haints at the end. Like I thought that was really beautiful and just really well done. So I feel like I don't know, for me, I feel like the ending was actually really good because it was like so hopeful in the end and it was like they got reunited with their father and it was like it was a good ending after like all the trauma that was this book, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. No, it did. It kind of was like now they can go live their life, and also going to Chicago, which obviously they were still racism, but it's probably like a little bit more liberal thinking than
Right. Than the South.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I agree. I know. I wasn't sure how I felt about their dad the whole time because it's like, you know, I get why he had to leave, but I
yeah.
was also kind of like,
Why wouldn't you take your family?
yeah, like yeah, the separation between him and his family, especially in like the 1950s, I was like, I mean,
Yeah,
come
I
on.
didn't,
Like what?
especially, and also because they kind of threw in that when their mom was dying of cancer, he stayed away from home a lot because I think it like obviously if your partner is dying of cancer, it's really upsetting. But
Yeah.
it almost just there was just more than one thing they would describe about their dad where I was like, oh, so he's like a good spokesperson for like his people, like black people, but he's a
Mhm.
bad dad. Like there were so
Right.
many things they would say that I was like, that doesn't sound like a very good dad to me.
Yeah. No, I agree. It was definitely yeah. I agree with what you said. He wasn't the best father, but I get why he did what he did kind of, but also like yeah, he should have taken them with him. Like I don't um but yeah, I agree. I think the ending definitely gave us some hope for the future of humanity. I would agree with that. I loved the author's note too at the very end. I don't know if that was something you read at the end of the book, but that line was so powerful to me when she said She said the Reformatory has a central villain, but the actual villain is a system of dehumanization. As my character Gloria herself notes in the final chapter, everyone would try to say that only the warden left Malden the Creek and created the unholy suffering at that place when the whole town had a hand. So like I really appreciate that she kind of mentioned that, like, yeah, even though the book has a clear villainous kind of character, it's really like the system in place that, you know, makes these things happen. So I really appreciated the author's note. And she kind of also talked about like the real life inspiration behind this book, because she talks about how she had a true life relative named Robert Stevens who died at the Dozier School for Boys in Florida in the 1930s. And she did go on to say that this book is obviously a work of fiction and it's not all inspired by true events. But I just thought that was really cool that, you know, she was inspired by something that has happened in her real life. And I feel like her connection to the story just made it even more, you know, powerful that that this is a thing. So I just thought the author's note was also like pretty hard hitting for me at the end. I was like, wow.
Yeah, I think even without the author's note, I knew that this was rooted in research. Like you can just tell. Like even the way that she described the school, I'm like, I know schools like this used to exist. Like I know.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I thought it was all very well done.
Yeah. I love when you can tell when you're reading a book that the author has like some real life investment in like the story and the plot and what's going on. And I feel like with this one it's just one of those books where you can definitely tell. So I agree. I don't know if we had anything else to touch on before. I mean, I guess we kind of talked about like, will you read more from this author in the future? And I think the answer there was like, it depends on the length of the book, I guess.
Yeah, it depends.
Yeah. I really would though. I really would love to see her do more of like the short horror, just because I did like her story a lot in Out There Screaming, and I do see a lot of potential with her writing for like something shorter in the future. I would love to read. But then I also just was wondering, like, as we're starting to wrap this up, you know, like, did you have any like books or like movies or TV shows that you could compare this to? Like if you liked this or if you didn't like this, maybe to check this out instead or something like that.
I don't have anything to compare it to, but I did read that this got optioned for a TV show even before it was published.
Oh.
So I think this would be a really good miniseries. I could like, I saw Katie just asked that.
Yeah,
I think this would be like, I actually think I would prefer it on screen. It kind of felt like she was like, let me write this really long thing so that when they adapt it, they have
she's got material.
But yeah, I think I would resonate with it more on screen because obviously things feeling slow in a TV show feels very different for me. Like I can put up that a little bit differently. Also, because the time commitment of a TV show versus, I mean, I guess it's more, but you know what I'm saying? Like it's hour episodes, you can do it, whatever.
That's interesting. Yeah, I do think it would actually make for a really good screen adaptation. Like I hadn't really thought about it, but I do think it would. And especially because like for me personally, like I can handle more historical fiction kind of stuff in shows or movies better than books. Like for some reason in books, it kind of like, it makes me like bored sometimes. But with movies, it's like it's a little bit more investing because like you actually see the like, I don't know. But it would definitely be like a hard hitting type of show or TV show to watch. But I do think it would make a good I do think it'd be good. And I agree with Kat, actually. Yeah, any S.A. Cosby, if you enjoyed this one, I think would be a good recommendation. The only one I could really think of for sure is When the Reckoning Comes by LaTanya McQueen. Just because, like, not that there's like a ton in common with this book, but I think because we're following this character who's a Black protagonist and she's going back to her small town where her white best friend is getting married on this plantation that's turned into like this resort. So there is a little bit of similarity, I thought, with this one. And this one was one of my favorite horror books, and it is shorter. It's you know, it's about like, I don't know, like 230 pages. So definitely if the Reformatory is a little intimidating because of its length, then
that's more achievable.
Yeah, this one's a lot more achievable with the size of it. So yeah, those would be the ones that I would think of for sure. But I haven't actually read the Nickel Boys, but I did see some people talk about this as like a good, as a good comparison. I would also, I would agree because like Lone Women was another one that I read that I wasn't the biggest fan of the historical kind of like Western feel to that one. But I do think, if you typically like the historical or Western feel, then this could be one that you would enjoy too. Very interesting. Good ones. I haven't heard of this one either. The Border. Yeah, I haven't heard of that one, but that's a good one. So yeah, thank you so much to everybody for all these recommendations. Did you have anything else you wanted to touch on before we wrap up the live show, or any other thoughts that we haven't touched on yet?
No, I don't think so. I think it was a very well, the plot was
Yeah.
I think as a book, I had issues with it as just a book. I think the story was a very important story to tell, is what I was going to
Yes.
say.
Yeah.
I think my personal reading taste did not align with how the book was, but I
Yeah.
liked the characters and stuff.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think this was definitely one of the tougher reads that I've had for my book club so far. So I definitely appreciate everybody who was able to read along with us this month. I'm feeling so good about my book club this year, though. Like I've just got to say, because I always have like really terrible success with a lot of the books that I read for my book club, and the fact that I had a 5 star in January, like one of my all-time favorite new books of all time, and then this one was probably like around 4.5 for me. So like I'm feeling great about you know like ratings wise, like I'm just glad that I'm enjoying the stuff recently.
What did you read
Um,
in January?
we read Bright Young Women by Jessica Knoll.
Oh, yeah, that's kind of like tentatively on my TBR because a lot of people
It's
loved it last
another
year.
tough one, actually. Like I don't know why I'm picking these
Yeah.
really tough reads, but like I feel like sometimes they end up being like the best for me because it's like it mentally makes you think about shit, and I don't know. I'm having a good time with the picks so far. I mean, next month I'm reading the new Alex.
I was gonna say that one could mess it up
I
because
know.
he is an author that is some ups and downs to some people.
Yeah,
Like
that's why I'm scared. I'm
The Silent
scared.
Patient is one of my least favorite books of all time.
Really? You
Yes.
see, I'm sitting over here like The Silent Patient was 5 stars, The Maidens was 5 stars. Like,
Okay,
what?
so unpopular opinion, I gave The Maidens 3 stars, but I actually liked The Maidens. I liked The Maidens
Oh,
better but everyone I read was like, ugh, this is bad.
I
I
know.
won't get into my feelings about The Silent Patient since you love it. It
Yeah.
was on the year I read it was on my worst list.
Oh, shoot. I know. A
But
lot of people either they love it or they hate The Silent Patient, so I totally
yeah,
understand.
yeah, it's a
But
divisive book. But yeah, so we'll have to see if his new book because it's been a while, because it was a while since The Maidens came out. So
no, I know. That's why I'm like excited to see like what's new with this author. And like so far he's been on a 5 star streak for
yeah,
me.
that's
So
good. Maybe he's your perfect author.
I know. So I'm like, maybe if this one could be a 5 star and I'm continuing this with the book troop, like holy shit, that would be
I was
crazy.
gonna say book club books are so hard because my Patreon book club, we have a running joke that we only pick bad books because we
Oh,
have liked like two things. Like
yeah.
I've had my Patreon for like 7 months, and there's been like two books that we kind of liked. There was
Yeah, it's
one.
hard.
So I it was funny because in December I chose a historical fiction for the book club because I was trained to dabble, and this is when I learned I don't like historical fiction. So I picked Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell, which is like a Shakespeare historical fiction,
Oh.
and so many of people in my book club were like, I just straight up didn't read it. I actually even DNF'd it, and I never DNF her, but I was like, guys,
Oh no.
I actually cannot read another page of this book.
Oh no.
I will say, Tanana Review, the Reformatory was more interesting than Hamnet.
Oh, well, I mean, there's at least that that's good. No, it's hard. It's hard to run a book club sometimes because it's like you just don't know how you're gonna feel about anything that you're picking, so you're just like hoping for the best. Like,
Yeah,
but yeah, what Katie said, that is accurate. It's like I've had my book club now since like early 2021, and I rarely see success with like the books that I'm
it's
choosing. So
hard. And
I'll
even if
take the
you let
win.
people vote, like I'll pick like two options and I'm like, these have
Yeah.
really like I also look at the Goodreads ratings. I'm like, okay, it has like a 3.9 or higher, blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
It's really hard. Especially I'm sure with the book troop because you're doing horror and thriller is also so divisive
It is.
that it's
Yeah.
like it's so hard to find books
Yeah.
that everyone's gonna love. But this one seems like a really good success.
I think so too. And I agree that it's a hard to because like I try to prioritize new releases just because that's what I'm like the most interested in reading usually. But then it's like it's even harder because if I'm having them vote on books that aren't even out yet, then we're
Then it's like we don't even
solely
know.
yeah, we're solely voting based off like how the synopsis sounds without any like general idea of how people feel about
The
it.
Ashley Winstead book did us both 30. I know you picked it for the
Oh,
book troop, and then I picked it in October for
yeah.
my book club. And I was like, never again will I pick something that doesn't have any reviews.
Yeah, no, that was a huge miss for me too. I know we felt very similarly about that one. But thank you for saying that, Kat. I'm so glad. I do think it was a good book pick overall because it did
Yeah,
push a lot of people out of their comfort zone, and it was a good discussion book for the most part, I think. So I appreciate that, and I'm so glad that yeah, if we missed it, I just mentioned the March book troop pick will be The Fury by Alex Michaelides. So hopefully that's a good time.
yeah.
But
I hope so. Honestly, I'll wait to see what all your reviews are.
right. And then you'll
Uh,
decide if it's worth it.
decide if I want to read it. I have
Yeah.
a bad habit. Sometimes I'll read multiple books by an author and not like any of them, but then just keep picking them up. So
Yeah, I do the same.
perhaps he'll be one of those for me.
That's like me with Ruth Ware. I'm always like, well, she's
Oh,
had one book that I've loved, but then the rest.
I'm also a Ruth Ware hater.
I've only, well, The Turn of the Key is like one of my favorite thrillers of all time, but then everything else has been like,
Also, hot take, Lucy Foley is basically Ruth Ware with that slightly better writing.
I actually like, well, I really like The Guest List is like one of my favorites, and then I really liked The Paris Apartment, which I know is kind of unpopular because people really hate that one, but I didn't really like The Hunting Party. Like Lucy Foley's very hit or miss for me.
Yeah.
But we'll see. I'm excited for her new release though this summer, the new Lucy Foley. It sounds like it'll be good. So we'll see. But yeah, thank you so much to everybody for joining us today and for reading along with us this month if you did. And special thanks to you, Sarah. I really do appreciate you taking the time today and hanging out. Because I know this was, especially if this didn't end up being an enjoyable read for you, then I appreciate you for,
Well, I also thought it was funny you chose me for this book because I was like, does Gabby think I'm an intellectual? A lot of my channel is me reading like crazy like romance TikTok books and making fun of them. And I was like, this is such a serious book for me.
I know.
I didn't even, the whole time I was like, I can't even crack jokes like I normally do because it's a very serious book.
Yeah, no, I that's what I mean. I so appreciate you for being here, even though this might have not been the best fit. Yeah, but I'll definitely have to have you on again in the future when we read something a little bit more lighthearted and silly. Yeah. But thanks so much for hanging out, and we will see you later. Have